So while Catalina solved some of her technical issues so she can present, I will pass on the word to Alvaro to hear on our project in Colombia and Ethiopia and how we have supported these two governments achieve their targets on green employment in the agricultural sector. Alvaro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Diana, and hi, everyone. And let me share my screen. This is the presentation. Yes. Please let me know if you see the presentation.
We can see that you're starting from not the beginning.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was rehearsing a bit. So today I'll talk about a tool we built to forecast the potential of green job creation within the agriculture sector of Ethiopia and Colombia. In terms of agenda, I'll first go over the context and objectives of the project. I'll discuss the main features of the methodology, and I'll finally present some of the results and provide some primer for discussion. Let me hide some of these controls, minimize this. So we basically work upon the premise that job creation is one of the most compelling climate action co-benefits. According to ILO estimates, for example, the greening of the global economy will create more than 24 million additional jobs by 2030, which is more than the current total employment in the fossil fuel industries. For developing countries and for agricultural societies, this is very relevant because it means that green jobs have the potential to lift millions of families out of poverty and promote at the same time social inclusion. Our project has three main objectives. The first objective is to quantify the employment impacts from implementing sustainable and climate resilient agriculture practices for selected crops in Ethiopia and Colombia. We also want to identify specific occupations and skills that will be at the forefront of the green transition within agriculture. Finally, we want to provide actionable policy recommendations for governments to accelerate the implementation of the national climate and development strategies. To achieve these objectives, the first step was identifying sustainable practices along agriculture value chains per crop and per country. This slide provides an example of that exercise that showcases some of the 21 sustainable practices that we assessed. The main mission was to estimate direct, indirect, and induced jobs stemming from the implementation of NDC targets. And the methodology is broadly based on two levels of economic analysis: a sustainable food value chain microeconomic approach that deals with labor intensities per subactivities within each crop within each country, and a second level, which is a macroeconomic analysis of the sectorial interlinkages that results in the estimation of indirect and induced jobs. I'll briefly describe these two levels in the next slides. We first followed FAO's exact VC tool to estimate the number of direct jobs by accounting the employment intensities of subactivities within each crop. These intensities reflect the number of workers per unit of output per value chain stage. This is described in the literature as man days, or the number of labor days required per activity in a specific value chain stage. Once we have the estimation of the direct jobs and the gross production value, we proceeded to use a supply-driven framework to model the relations between inputs and outputs in order to estimate indirect and induced jobs. This is usually referred to as input-output modeling, and this is based upon input-output tables that describe the financial flows of all economic transactions within an economy. This table provides a broad view of the project designs for Colombia, with an outline of the sustainable practices assumed for each crop and estimates of project costs and total job creation per $1 million of investment. The main takeaway is that investing $1 million in sustainable practice projects for cocoa, forestry, rice, sugar in Colombia would yield an average of 500 jobs. The tool that we design and build provides many other indicators related to employment outcomes, such as employment by gender or labor formality, or the impact of climate change on labor productivity. For the sake of time, however, I'll focus on the total job creation potential before we head off for the skills and occupations section of the presentation. For Colombia, we found that compared to business as usual practices, the NDC's sustainable agriculture initiatives could create a total of 1.4 million jobs over the next decade, a significant increase from the 800,000 jobs estimated applying traditional agriculture. This total job creation varies depending on the level of wages using modeling each scenario. Using wages that are one standard deviation under the mean would elevate this estimate to 2.9 million jobs. And if we use wages that are one standard deviation above the mean, the estimate of job creation falls to 1.1 million. For Colombia. Similarly, for Ethiopia, we estimate that the country's NDC targets could create a total of 4.2 million new jobs compared to 3 million under business as usual in terms of not applying sustainable practices in the crops we studied. We complemented the estimate of job creation with the assessment of skills and occupations required for those jobs. Let's first have a primer to understand the differences between economic sectors, occupations, and skills and qualifications for this part of the presentation. In this diagram, we have the story of a rice co-op that needs to hire a farm manager, where the co-op is within the agriculture sector according to international standards of industries, and the farm manager is an occupation according to similar taxonomies. And the farm manager is required to be qualified for presenting general information, which is, according to the ESCO taxonomy, a skill that he or she acquires in training or traditional schooling in an educational institution. So this helps us understand the differences between economic sector, occupation, and skills. And there are different types of skills. We can define different categories of skills. For example, generic skills required by most occupations within agriculture, or skills required for the cultivation of specific crops. And there are transferable skills or skills common across crops. And we also have a definition of green skills. Given that primer To identify skills, we use a set of occupation to skill matrices recently published by the European Commission. These are 15 tables that provide a composition of skills requirements for occupations. They range from very broad occupational and skill label categories to granular occupation and skill sets. At their most detailed level, you can match 3,000 occupations with about 300 skills. For each occupation skill pair, they provide a number that indicates the percentage of importance that each skill has for that specific occupation. In our study for Colombia and Ethiopia, these matrices help us assess the composition of skills occupations in agriculture. However, this analysis is not limited to any economic sector, and it can be, and since it's comparable to international standards, it can be used for most countries and for most sectors. Our approach is parsimonious. We first use microdata to identify relevant occupations among an economic sector. Then we use the occupation to skill matrices to identify the set of skills required for the occupations previously identified in the labor or agriculture surveys. We also use a data set of published regarding 570 green skills or skills identified as green, and applied machine learning to match the general skill labels to these 570 green skills. This slide illustrates the identification of skills for a couple of occupations, namely cocoa bean roaster and cocoa bean cleaners. We can see the 5 most required skills for each of these occupations. In the case of bean cleaners, they represent 51% of the total number of skills required in that occupation, and in the case of cocoa bean roaster, the figure is 40%. And we can see that they share some skills, but there are some skills that are not common among them. And even the skills that they share, the intensity of importance of that specific skill may vary. So we have some lessons from that skill composition data that are provided by the analysis. And that is that there are common skills that are common across occupations, but there are also differentiated skills that one occupation does not share with others. And in terms of in the cases where occupations share one skill, the intensity or importance of that skill may vary. So there is also an overlap in the skills required across occupations. This figure has the results of the machine learning exercise applied to 4 occupations: crop production worker, agricultural technician, agricultural engineer, and farm manager. A quick read tells us that occupations such as agricultural engineers and technicians have a higher share of green skills component compared to traditional skills. And on the other hand, farm managers and crop production workers have a higher proportion of traditional skills relative to green skills. Let's dive a little bit deeper into this machine learning exercise with the example of agricultural technicians. This table first provides a set of skills that are general strings displayed along their respective percentage, denoting the degree to which each skill is relevant to the tasks performed in the occupation. A second column named green indicates whether each skill was assessed as similar to one of the 570 green skills labels provided by CEDEFOP. We classified a general skill label as green or basically a green skill if the cosine similarity coefficient was greater or equal to 0.75. And in the last column, we add the skill importance percentage for those skills that we consider as green. And that gives or provides with the percentage that we saw on the previous slide, which for agricultural technician is 66, or that says that 66% of the total skill set required for that occupation can be considered as green. The study provides or gives a view of the potential for employment generation within agriculture in these two countries. In the coming decade, we hope we have the potential to create more than 1 million jobs in Colombia and more than 4 million jobs in Ethiopia for these crops. Our tool is informative, scalable, and extensible, but it can also be strengthened by a set of policy recommendations, which include enhancing data quality, tailoring NDC's policies, and addressing labor market challenges within agriculture. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any question or comment.
Thanks a lot, Alvaro. It was actually very nice to hear from a technical assessment on green jobs. It's very important to provide these quantitative data to countries for them to know what is the potential that they can reach and how feasible it is for them to reach their green employment targets, especially for high labor-intensive sectors such as the agriculture sector. It was also very interesting to know, particularly for the agricultural sector, how we can answer specific questions such as which practice or climate-smart agricultural practice can generate more employment, and for which specific crops we can use it. Especially in your project, comparing two different countries, although both developing countries, they have different levels of developing within the agricultural sector, and it's interesting to see the difference of employment potential, and also to see the difference in the recommendations that this type of analysis can provide to each of the governments. It was also very interesting to see how we can assess the skills gaps and to have detailed insights within the occupations, and not only employment at a general specific sector, but going deeper into the specific occupations for specific crops, for example, and assessing these skill gaps, which at the end of the day will allow us to basically match the demand of employment with the supply of skills, and close these skills gaps, also close the quality gap for education, either at high level or at a technical level. And finally, it was also very interesting to see how a qualitative assessment of employment looks into the different stages of the value chain of a specific sector and can provide detailed data on each of the stages of a value chain. So the governments can actually receive recommendations for each of the stages of the value chain. So I will ask all the attendees to feel free to ask any questions. And now we will hear from Catalina. Hopefully she was able to improve her sound. We will hear more on the perspective on how we can implement or support the government implement a framework to basically start measuring and start considering green employment within the agricultural sector and potentially within other economic sectors in the country. So Catalina, the floor is yours.
Issues here with the internet.
Perhaps if you turn off your video, might go smoother.
That's the only way it's going to work. Sorry about that.
Yes, a little better. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So this is now the presentation in presentation mode.
Yes, we can see your presentation.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to present the document on the green jobs for the agriculture and forestry sector in Uzbekistan. That is part of our RLC Green Recovery Investment Project, which is a project financed by COICA. It's a 5.9 million project to address impacts of the RLC crisis in the Kyrgyzstan Republic. And it will benefit more than 26,000 people. And we have a lot of different stakeholders, government partners, and other implementing partners. Changing computers, so probably the internet is better. Okay. Okay, perfect. So from our RLC GRIP project, we have 4 different outcomes. And in our outcome 1, which is the RLC development program, to
sorry, Catalina, I believe we lost your sound.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about all of this. So in this project, we have 3 areas that are related to the creation of green jobs. One is the Green Recovery Investment Planning Strategy. The second one is the capacity building and piloting the green business models that will allow us to create more green jobs. And finally, the access to finance for these new entrepreneurs. And now we can pass to the document itself. So the objective of the Green Jobs Assessment is support the establishment of Uzbekistan green policy and setting out the first definition of green jobs in the country. And that will support the implementation of an economic green growth model. And with the document, we will provide the situational analysis of the labor market in both sectors in the country. We also built the definition that I was mentioning, and we provide recommendations for creating new green jobs. So the first step was to check what is happening in Uzbekistan right now. The country is the 5th most carbon intensive economy in the world, has unsustainable agricultural practices, and faces all the problems of the desertification of the RLC. And one of the problems, and we say that is the greatest challenges in the country, is the employment sector. So the challenge is that on average, just 280,000 employments are created annually, and that is less than half of the employments that are needed. So we face that biggest challenge. And then the opportunity is that Uzbekistan working age population has increased rapidly in the last years. And the proportion of people available to work is around 70%, and it will remain the same until 2040, which gives us the opportunity right now to use this human capital in order to create a sustainable economy. So what are the green policies that we have here in the country? The first one is the strategy for the transformation of the Republic of Uzbekistan to a green economy. And in that specific strategy, they state 2 activities that can be related to green jobs. The first one is restoration of forests and preservation of natural vegetation. And the second one is expanding plantations. The other policy that was important for us is the program on the transition to the green economy and ensuring green growth in the country until 2030. And here also they state 3 activities that are related to green jobs. First, the diversification of the agricultural production, the increase of climate resilience tree plantations, and the increase of production of cereals. Finally, we also analyze the agricultural development strategy for the country because they state the green jobs as one of the priorities. On the other side, we also analyze the decent work policy in the country, and Uzbekistan already has a legal framework that provides rights and guarantees for people, and that we can call the decent job legal framework. So in one of the decrees of the president, they have measures to improve the system of the social protection, and they have different, let's say, allowance or instruments that help to have a decent job. And those are the allowances for temporary disability, the benefits for pregnancy, childbirth, the burial allowance, pension security, and unemployment benefits. Also in this decree, they have the concept for a national strategy for social protection and the roadmap for that. And the government is right now working in that strategy. So considering the policies that the government has right now, we have opportunities. And the first opportunity is that right now, Uzbekistan government is willing and committed towards green jobs. And also that mentions specifically green jobs in the strategy for the transition to a green economy. And also we have challenges. And the first one is that we don't have guidelines or a proper definition for green jobs. And also the lack of data, because right now it's difficult to know what are the numbers of green jobs or what sectors are related to green jobs in the country. So considering this gap in the policy, we believe that we can use the definition of green jobs that GGGI has, and that is that an employment created for the green growth investments that follows the decent jobs criteria could be a green job. And that decent jobs criteria include adequately monthly wage, work stability and security, occupational hazard management, decent working hours, availability of social protection schemes, and no child labor or bonded labor. So after analyzing all of these policies and all the context of the country, we have the following conclusions and recommendations. So our general conclusions are that green jobs right now are a potential solution for the existing problems related to sustainable and inclusive economic growth in the country. And it's good that right now those things are stated in the policies and are part of the economic agenda. For the agriculture and forestry sector, using the definition of green jobs and starting creating these jobs will boost productivity and will address climate change. And right now we cannot be certain about the impact of the green jobs because we have problems with data collection and the labor markets are not properly set. But in the future, if we solve these problems of data and of information, we will have a really good potential impact for green jobs. So the definition that we have here is the result of the assessment. We base our definition in the United Nations Environmental Program definition, the International Labour Organization, and the United Nations Development Program, and adapt those definitions to the Uzbekistan context. So the green job definitions for us is a full-time, part-time, or seasonal job to which all people above the age of 16 can apply, formally register and contributing to the social system in Uzbekistan, directly engaged in climate-smart agricultural technologies on farm, or for landscape management and restoration, particularly in the following interventions. And we identified different activities in the forestry sector and in the agricultural sector. So for forestry, we have restoring forests, increasing conservation and protection of forest areas, expanding plantation, creating soil protective forests, and creating good production systems that are sustainable. In the agricultural sector, we have organic farming methods, energy efficient and water saving technologies, diversifying crops production, processing and storage organic animal waste, breeding highly productive animals, and agroforestry systems. So these are the activities, according to all the analysis that we did, that can be part of the green jobs in these two sectors. And finally, we had some recommendations that are general for the creation of new jobs, new green jobs in Uzbekistan. So the first one is to invest in capital development to ensure that all workers have the skills that are needed for the green transition. Additionally, that includes investing in capacity development programs for forest and farms enterprises, and develop inclusive mechanisms to formalizing the priority green sectors into the information from labor markets. We also believe that it's important to introduce digital mechanisms for managing worker recruitment and to build a strong system to put the green sector, the green labor market sector as a priority for information and analysis. And after finalizing this document, we talked with the different stakeholders, and we have the government letter of endorsement of the Ministry of Employment and Poverty Reduction, saying that they are going to assess again the document and select this first definition as one that they can use to improve their policies and their activities. So that's everything from my side. Thank you. I hope you could hear everything properly.
Thank you, Catalina. Yeah, we were able to hear most of the insights from your project. It's actually very, very interesting, and it's very important to recognize the importance of helping countries tailor the ILO definition of green jobs based on their context. And this will help them from measuring the number of green jobs in the future to, as you mentioned, provide policy and establish actual programs in order to create green jobs within the agriculture and forestry sector. You mentioned something that is very relevant, and it's considering the decent aspects of the jobs, and that makes them also a green job. Considering all the aspects that the country already consider as decent employment and integrate them into the definition. You also mentioned how difficult it is to match the existing policies and the existing strategies of the country towards the creation of green jobs, and basically developing a consistent definition that can cover all these policies and national targets. You presented this framework for creating green jobs that consisted not only in the assessment of green jobs, but also in providing capacity building for creating business models that can actually create jobs, and the importance of financing those business models and those entrepreneurship activities to create employment. It was very insightful to see how your project will allow the country to develop the green growth model, and that it has been endorsed by the government. So now I will leave to the audience if they have any questions for our panelists. Feel free to raise your hand or write it in the chat. I can see a question from Gustavo Ruiz. And I will read it out loud. Can precision agriculture be considered a green job as well, as it optimizes the use of inputs at farm level? that question, potentially, Alvaro, would you like to try it? If precision agriculture can be considered a green job, and basically all these jobs that are focusing on optimizing inputs and outputs, are they considering green jobs within the agricultural sector?
Yes, thank you for the question. And yes, I believe so, because as we saw in the slide that defines green skills relate to adaptation services and mitigation and climate resilience services. So if, for example, an occupation has a lot of these skills that relate to adaptation and climate resilient services, then it could be defined as a green job. There are different definitions of green jobs. If you look at the definition from ILO or FAO or the World Bank, you're going to see some specific nuances, but in general, if they provide mitigation adaptation services, and if they are formal employment, meaning that they contribute to social security, if they provide a living wage, those are some of the criteria or indicators that serve to define green jobs according to these international institutions. And mitigation and adaptation and efficiency and services that provide efficient to resources could definitely be considered as green skills and green jobs for that measure.
Thank you, Alvaro. Catalina, from your perspective, could you tell us if the definition that was developed for Uzbekistan considers precision agriculture or specific climate-smart agricultural practices under the green jobs definition? And more or less, how was the process to develop this definition and considering specific occupations and skills?
Thank you for your question. And the answer is yes. Actually, all the climate smart agriculture can be part of the green job definition. And we set it like that because almost all of the practices that are related to climate smart agriculture intends to reduce the impacts of the agriculture and will support the adaptation and mitigation to climate change, as Alvaro was mentioning. So the short answer is yes. And for us to specify the definition, here we use different international definitions, but we use the Uzbekistan context in order to identify the activities that could be related to green jobs. And for that, we analyze different policies that the government already has.
Thank you, Catalina. We have one more question, and this one might be directed to Alvaro. Alvaro, could you tell us how we can apply this type of qualitative assessments to other countries within the agricultural sector or within other economic sectors?
Yes, thanks for the question. I think the tool, since it relies on both on microdata and macrodata, which is for the most part standard, is highly extensible to other countries and economic sectors. Input-output modeling on the macroeconomic side, for example, is a standard tool in economic analysis, and it has been applied to many sectors and lots of countries. So it could even provide there is literature to provide benchmarks in terms of the results. And value chain analysis under the framework of FAO's exact family of tools, exact VC, is also a standard, and it has been applied to different countries and different contexts. So that would permit also international comparisons. In terms of data, for the value chain part of the analysis, you would need a set of microdata estimates of labor distribution among economic sectors or activities, wages, indicators related to gender participation or household participation in economic activities. And from the macroeconomic side, and also from the value chain, you would need a thorough research on labor intensities, which could come both from the surveys or censuses, agricultural censuses, labor market, or agricultural surveys, or even household surveys, but also from doing research on the literature. And from the macroeconomic perspective, you mostly need a national account statistics. You need the input-output tables, which are standard, and most countries have developed those. You may have some issues of temporal validity because these tables are sometimes old or not updated, but for the most part, that shouldn't be much of a problem. So again, it's highly scalable and to other countries and sectors, and the data requirements are not as intensive as in other type of economic analysis.
Thank you, Alvaro. We have two more questions. The first question is, so must be decent by definition, but when it comes to the agricultural sector, there are many seasonal workers. Can we consider them as green jobs? And how do we, for example, within your project, how did you assess these seasonal workers how do you account them for green jobs? Alvaro, and yeah, then potentially we can hear from Catalina.
Yes, so as I commented on the first question, there are international definitions of green jobs. If we consider one of the most commonly referred, which is the ILO's definition, if the job does not provide social security, and if it does not provide a living wage or a wage that allows the worker to live himself, herself, or her, and his or her family out of poverty, then that could not be considered a green job, even when the services he or she provides are related to mitigation, adaptation, and related to climate resilient tasks. So in that regard, I would say that you also have to consider the context of the country and the definitions that the specific countries follow in terms of what they consider green jobs. But from international standards, you not only have to be in performing tasks related to climate change, adaptation, mitigation, resilience, but also would have to have job stability and income security.
Thank you, Alvaro. Catalina, from the work that you did in Uzbekistan, did you consider seasonal workers as green jobs? Do they comply with the decent jobs requirements within Uzbekistan?
Yes, so considering the context of the country, we consider seasonal workers as green jobs, but in order to count them, you cannot just say like that person was hired for the season and is one job. Actually, you need to complete the whole number of days working per year in order to count as one job, and that is the difference with a normal job. But considering what happens here in the agriculture and forestry sector, most of the works in those sectors are seasonal, and normally the workers change from work to work within the year. So for instance, maybe in this season they are working in a crop, and in the next season they are working in another one. So we cannot say that is not a green job, it's just different type of job. And that's how we manage to account for that.
Thank you, Catalina. So we have one more question. So they are asking us how these green jobs assessments are fed in training and skills programs, and how the results of this assessment can actually inform the development of basically training and education in the countries that GGI works, basically developing countries. Do you have any examples or any recommendations of how we can utilize the results of this type of quantitative and qualitative assessments? Alvaro?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think the skills development and workforce development literature provides different answers to that, but they are, for the most part, context specific. So I would regard to national curricular development plans and international studies for that matter. What this type of studies provides is a in-depth view of specific skills per occupation. If we have a measure of which occupations are required for specific projects, we can then assess which skills these occupations need and provide those in training. And the good thing, or the good evidence or result from this research is that, or the good news is that many of the occupations share skills, which means that you can provide training that's gonna impact different workers from different educational levels and backgrounds. And many of these skills can also be acquired in the short run. So that means that providing even short-term training programs could help them be work ready in the short run in another months, according to other studies, for example, in the construction sector.
Thank you, Alvaro. And well, I see we're running out of time. Thank you, Catalina and Alvaro, for your great presentations and for sharing the insights of your projects. We can see that these are highly ambitious and have informed the countries on how to actually create green jobs and provide a baseline for measuring and creating green jobs. It was very insightful. I will also like to thank all the participants and attendees who were here in this session. I hope you learned a little bit more. And if you have any questions regarding these projects, you can reach us out and we will be glad to hear from you and reply. So thanks a lot. With this, I will conclude today's session. Thank you.